I'm on Letterboxd, and I did the lowest first. First of all, the way that all of the first low ratings are from white people, very telling.
Yeah.
Very, very telling.
Yeah.
But this one, hold on, let me zoom into this profile picture real quick, because the first line of the review says a white woman directing this. Yikes. And it's like, no, but that's the point.
Hello?
Because
a white woman directing this. Lots of things going on here.
A light-skinned black person, I'm presuming when I zoom in, but like light skin, which is also like, that's the freaking point. It's a 1 star. A white woman directing this? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Kinda yikes. I like Rebecca Hall too. I just don't want to see black women's stories being told through the lenses of white women. So the thing is that if you like Rebecca Hall, one Google search will show you that her mom doesn't identify as white and has identified as black despite being very, very light, and that Rebecca, being her daughter and having a white dad, also is very, very light and can move through the world as white, if so choosing to do so. But at the time of when her mom was growing up, and probably her grandparents, regardless of how light they were seen as black and as African American, because if you had any relationship or any descent from anyone who's black or from Africa, you are automatically seen as black. So the fact that this person watched this movie and even knows who the director is and still sees this movie as being told through the lens of white women, I think completely like misses the point.
Because the whole point of the movie is like, what is whiteness? What is blackness? Like that, the movie and this book is really interrogating that. What are the binaries that we impose, and how arbitrarily are they imposed? And when people respond to this movie by arbitrarily imposing these boundaries onto them.
Oh. Wait, hold on. There's more. Okay, I'm just going to read the whole thing. So, through the lens of a white woman. I finished a movie, and I'm presuming the movie, and as a passing light-skinned black woman, this is not compelling in the slightest. It's so bad, it works as satire. I don't expect non-black folks to understand this, but the reviews on here clearly result of white people not understanding colorism in the black community at all, which I find that this being their conclusion very baffling, because it's like the call is coming from inside the house, in my opinion, as someone who's mixed, as someone who is light-skinned, not to do like biracial on biracial crime, but like I think that you're the one not getting it, this anonymous reviewer, since you didn't volunteer yourself to be on this podcast. The third part is of this review, too many non-black folks have taken it upon themselves to tell me about Rebecca Hall's mom. I saw her. Rebecca is still white. Please be silent on this topic unless you are willing to learn and truly understand this from the black perspective. Thanks.
This movie is an adaptation of a book written in 1920s, set in the 1920s. What race looked like in the 1920s, very different from today. Yes, by today's standards, Rebecca Hall is a white woman.
Yes.
But guess what? 50 years ago, she would not be. 20 years ago, she probably would not. Like, race is one of those things that is constantly moving. And that's what this book, that's what this movie, that's what the adaptation of this movie is talking about. That's why the casting was intentional. That's why Rebecca Hall is the one directing this.
Rebecca Hall's mom was literally born in, like, I think 1950 when I looked. And at that time, being born in 1950 would have been marked as a black child. Would have been
right. Like, she lived her whole life as a black person, a black American woman. That was her whole life, you know? And, like, being the child of someone who is a black American woman is obviously going to shape your experiences and your understanding of race in a way that someone who is the child of a white American woman is not going to experience. it's just weird to sort of, I think, reduce people's experiences and perspectives on things into such a, again, black and white sort of situation, which is what this movie is itself criticizing. We also see this in the very opening scene when Rene walks into a restaurant and the white man waiter is like, right this way, ma'am. And she's like, there's like a little tense moment. That tensity escalates as she's sitting there looking at the old white ladies and then looking at a white lady who ends up being Claire and not being white.
I noticed that because it happens even, that tenseness happens even before. It happens in the cab because the cab driver would have not have recommended the hotel that he recommended if he clocked Rene as black. And also you can see there's like this brilliant, it was one of my, like, really early, like, is this small detail in the movie, and that's when I realized, I was like, oh, I need to, like, pay attention, like, this movie's gonna be a movie, was she is, like, walking on the pavement in front of the hotel. She, like, is walking, and she just barely stops, and she waits for the doorman to assume that she wants to enter the building before she, like, stops and turns the hotel to go in, because that is like another sign of if she passes or not. Because if the bellman thought she was black, then he wouldn't have opened the door for anyone who's walking down the street, and then she would have just kept walking and would have been like, okay, I didn't pass. It's like this small hesitation where, like, she hesitates, and then the bellman's like, oh, that's a white woman, I should open the door, and then that is what, like, grants her entry. And then the thing with the waiter, like, adds on top of it. Like, you can just, like, feel she has to wait to see how they react to her before she knows if she's passing or not. Oh, but also, there's the short story Recitatif by Toni Morrison. Reminded me a lot of this film because it's about these two girls who are put in an orphanage, but they still have their living mothers, but, like, their parents aren't able to take care of them. So that's why they're put in the orphanage. And one is white and one is black. And we know that one is white and one is black, but we don't know which one. And, like, it's divided into 3 parts: when they're children in the orphanage, and then when they're in their, like, early 20s, and one's working at a diner, and one gets off of a Greyhound bus that's, like, full of groupies and people, I think, like, heading west for some concert or something, and they, like, meet again. One's getting off the bus, one's working at a diner, and we don't know which one. The 3rd part is when they're both adults and they are, like, married and with children, and they end up, like, living in the same town, except one is, like, not very well off economically, and one ends up marrying this, like, man who's, like, really rich. And there's this protest that happens about busing schools,
Desegregation?
Like, yeah. But is that the name of, like, the actual policy?
Yeah.
Okay. So that, and there's a protest, and one line of women is like, we don't want black kids in our school. Mm-hmm. And then the other side is, we don't want our black kids going to white schools. Mm-hmm. But then again, we don't know who is on which side. Mm-hmm. So those are, like, the 3 times that we see them. And race is, like, such a big part of these people's lives, but we don't know which one is white and which one is black. So there are moments you read and you're, like, figuring it out, but then also puts you in the position of, like, what assumptions or, like, what do you think are conclusions of, like, what's being presented that tells you about who's the race of which one. Like, why do you think that this means that this character is black?
Both of these pieces of media kind of show how people react to these pieces of media, reveal more about their understanding of race than what the media itself is saying about it, you know? Like, how you interpret what Nella Larsen is trying to say or what Toni Morrison is trying to say about race, and then in their books tells you more about the politics of who you are, and then the capacity for which that you understand history and race than anything else, really. Like, and
I probably read it, like, 3 or 4 times. I'm gonna be the one to crack the code.
Who is the intended audience, and how are you catering towards them? I think this book is also, speaking of historical women's colleges, this book is one of the required reading courses for the first year writing class at Barnard College, Columbia, New York, which makes sense because, you know, it's about New York City. I thought it was interesting that this is part of the like, core curriculum, this book. I wonder what those classroom discussions look like, considering that school is, like, 80% white or whatever, you know? Like,
I was gonna say, like, if, like, a white liberal who thinks that,
what are
like,
your takes on this? Well, okay, actually, this made me think...
Or, like, about, like, emotional politics of, like, valid, invalid, hurt feelings, da-da-da.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Girl, get me away from this.
I don't want to know what you think about this movie. I don't want to know what conclusions you're coming to.
Mm-hmm.